Well, they close the door, so I guess we can start then. So they can join later, there won't be a problem. So I was requested to say that this will be the last panel of today of the computer science track. And also, actually, one of our panelists asked us to ask, so I'll start with this icebreaker. What are your backgrounds? So if we have lawyers, could you please raise your hand? So we have some lawyers, great. Computer scientists. Other areas? Could you just maybe say one of the other areas?
Community management or project management.
Great. I saw another hand behind, yeah. Great. Yeah, okay, so we have a little bit of interdisciplinarity. That's great, because actually this panel is also very interdisciplinary. So we have people from computer science, law, some political science too. And we kind of want to make this discussion a little bit, not just fully computer science, but we were into like interdisciplinarity with computer science and law. So I'm the moderator, so I have certain rights, but okay, anyhow. My name is Claudia Negri. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Luxembourg, and I work with requirements engineering and conceptual modeling. And I myself have also an interdisciplinary background. And I would like all to welcome you today to our panel of strengthening trust in computing technologies for detecting illegal deception online. As the title suggests, we will be talking about the usage of technologies or artifacts, tools, frameworks, whatever you want to call it, whatever you have built, for regulatory purpose, or RegTech. It can be abbreviated like that. In particular, we will be discussing on the usage of these tools or these artifacts to kind of automate the detection of deceptive practices, such as deception patterns or dark patterns, however you want to call it, or to gather evidence, enforce action, or propose remedies. However, when you are building these tools or these artifacts, different types of challenges arises, such as like what is the impact of the quality? What is the impact of the dataset in the quality of the input and the output? What are the requirements that need to be met? What is the reliability of these artifacts, the scalability, trust issues, etc.? What do the business needs? What do the regulators need? And for this, as I said, we have gathered a panel of amazing experts from different areas and backgrounds, expertise coming from regulation, academia, regulatory bodies, academia, activism, and business. In particular, we want to discuss maybe some more technical aspects of these tools, but also from a legal perspective, such as reliability and verifiability, scalability, what is the impact of maintaining or not maintaining these tools, the adoption, how can they be massively adopted, what is the added value that they can bring, do they have to actually have AI, and other questions. Per request of the panelists, I will say, as usual, all disclaimers apply, meaning that the panelists here are presenting their own views and not those of their employers or the organization they're affiliated with. So please take this into account. I'll just briefly introduce all of the panelists, and then they'll go and present 3 minutes. How we want to do this is each of them will have a presentation of 2 to 4 minutes about what they do and what their focus. Then we have some questions between us, and then over the last 35 minutes, we'll open the floor for the public to make questions and kind of discuss with us. So our first panelist is Ariana, right there. She's affiliated with the Leader Lab at Santa Ana in Italy, and she's an expert on online manipulation, usable privacy, and legal design. She carries out empirical and theoretical research over clear interdisciplinary aspects of computer science, including human-centered design and computer science. Our second panelist who will be online is Trashkan, who is Chief Technology Officer at the Fair Patterns and Open Eyes Technologies. There he is, great. With over 25 years of leadership in AI-driven innovation, ethical design, and education technology. He's a Forbes Technology Council member and an advisor to the few international organizations. We're not going to name them, we don't have time. And Trash has been also honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Office of the US President Biden. Our third panelist is Vincent from the CNIL. Vincent is the head, as I said, of the CNIL Digital Innovation Lab, or LINC, which is an interdisciplinary lab, with computer scientists, sociologists, foresight analysts. Vincent has a PhD in computer networks from Telecom Paris Tech from 2008, and did a postdoc at NYU under the supervision of Professor Helen Nussbaum. He has a long history of working as an engineer with regulatory organizations. And finally, our final panelist is Stefan, right there, from None of Your Business. Stefan is a computer scientist with plenty of experience in different IT organizations, both public and private. And he joined None of Your Business in 2022 as an all IT all-rounder, so we can only imagine how much work he has. So I'll give the floor now to Ariana so she could start presenting a little bit what she's doing and her points of view over the topic.
Okay, thank you so much, Claudia, for the very nice introduction. Thank you so much for being here, even though there are a lot of other interesting panels happening at the same time. I just want to give you a little bit of background of how I got here, and then I'm going to introduce a couple of research studies that I am conducting with my co-authors. So the fact is that when I was still at the University of Luxembourg, where Claudia also works, we had a whole project on dark patterns. This was funded in 2020, if I'm not wrong, and back then we already had the idea of using, let's say, computing technologies for scaling up the detection of dark patterns, okay? And back at the time, one of the very first tools that we thought, so imagine it was very early research, very early days in the research about deceptive design patterns. And one of the first things that we produced was a browser extension. It was able to get a screenshot of a certain web page, and you could describe it according to certain descriptors. And then the idea was to share this knowledge with other experts so that we could actually build a knowledge base about dark patterns. But already back at the time, we started to wonder about certain things. The first thing would be, well, who would use that kind of knowledge? From the question about who the users would be, then other kind of information also descended, for example, where then what are the requirements for that, right? So how would you describe a certain screenshot, but also do you only need a screenshot or do you also need other kind of data? So these are very important questions, and actually this is also how we got to another strand of research. And I'm not the first author of this research. Actually, our PhD student Emre Kocit is, and he's also the computer scientist behind this. So I hope I can answer some of the questions, but probably not all of them. But we're going to publish a paper on this tool that I'm going to speak about, in fact, next month. So you can already ask for a preprint. But basically, what we did is that we wanted to experiment with LLMs, whether it was possible to detect dark patterns, whether the performances were comparable to those of experts in dark patterns and in dark pattern detection, and whether the explanations of the LLM would be also clear, complete, correct, especially, and verifiable. And the idea was also that we, in order to have, let's say, more reliable results, we also used retrieval augmented generation. So we actually had a very, very small knowledge base. Some of the people that are here actually participated in this study. Well, there are many things I can say, but just for a start, I can say that we found out that the data sets existing on dark patterns out there were not good enough. Actually, I can go a little bit more into this, but we had to create our own data set. We involved experts in dark patterns. Already also defining what is an expert in dark pattern is a question on its own. And we curated, let's say, the first expert-created data set about this, and we released it, okay? And the idea now, of course, is that we don't want to only use GPT. It was, let's say, early work. We are also now trying to use other, especially open source models, and compare the performances. Well, just a long story short, the model worked pretty well. We can say that the performances were comparable to those of experts. But then we realized that actually there are a lot of other people around the world working on creating automated tools for the detection of dark patterns. Most of them work with the machine learning, especially working on natural language processing and image recognition. But again, spoiler, most of these tools actually do not detect dark patterns. This is what we are actually looking into because of the data sets that they use. And then we had a lot of other questions coming from this study. These questions, I'm actually looking into these with another colleague of mine from Delft University, Simon Parkin, because all of these studies, ours included, claim that we are producing these tools to help enforcement agencies to do their work in a more expedite way. Okay, so basically to alleviate some of the burden, some of the burden that there is in detecting dark patterns. Why? Because dark patterns are everywhere, and enforcement agencies maybe do not have enough resources to look at all of these problems online. Okay, So we started to hold some interviews, especially with data protection authorities and consumer protection authorities, to understand whether they are developing their own tools or they're using some of these tools for the for the detection of dark patterns. And I can share some early insights into what we found, although this research has not been published yet, and actually we're still analyzing the results. The fact is that we can see that there is a broader trend of digitalization internal to these agencies. Okay, so they use automated tools for any kind of automation. Basically, everybody's a bit obsessed with the time and efficiency. Okay, why? Because as I was saying, there is, the problem is really scaling up, and we don't have enough resources to really try to tackle all of the issues out there. But this also shows that there is a need for these tools. Okay, and this also connects back to the panel that was here before. These tools do a lot of things. Mainly what they need them for is to collect evidence at scale. Also for filtering out all of the information that is there. But in the end, there is always a human verification. I can say I am already, okay, yes, okay. So I'm just going to share a couple of other insights. It's also interesting because some enforcement agencies have internal units. There are data science units, for example, okay, so they can develop their own tools. Others do not have those kind of skills internally or do not have those kind of resources, so they need to actually resort to external resources. And this happens in many ways, okay? So they can collaborate with other agencies. There is actually an e-lab by the European Commission that is providing some of these tools. They can also collaborate with researchers, and I think that maybe Knil is going to speak a little bit about this, and I think this is an amazing opportunity for all of us. But they also ask private companies sometimes also to furnish those kind of tools. So they co-develop tools according to their needs.
Let's maybe leave it there. Just no worries. We can discuss more about that in the Q&A, and the discussion. Thank you, Ariana. Trash, you will have the floor now. I don't know if you could join. Great, thank you.
You guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Claudia, for the introductions. Again, just to be more, and already she has told about the disclaimer, but I just wanted to be an extra clear. Presenting from US, my viewpoint definitely does not represent anything from the Trump administrator either. So just want to make sure that there is nothing basically on that sort of the things. As a Chief Technology and Information Officer for the fairpattern.com, I am probably leading the strategic directions and execution of our technology efforts in support of our mission to eliminate the deceptive design practices online. So with 25 years of experience in different designs and different actually the architecture way with the AI now, we are closely working with our legal, our UX, and the behavioral science team to deliver the products that help detect the dark patterns and recommending the fair patterns, on the other hand, from some user-first alternatives also. So our focus is on building the technology that empowers the people and organizations while promoting the digital trust and inclusions whenever we can. So at FairPattern, we are not just building the tools, but we are shaping a more ethical and transparent digital future, around the globe or so. Having said that, the tool itself for the FairPattern was actually born in 2022, like 3 years ago, by Mari Patel. She's a former general counsel turned entrepreneur with a mission to eliminate the deceptive design, or as we call dark patterns, and promote the ethical or user-first digital experiences through a blend of the UX, law, the behavioral sciences, and the technology. So the AI solution to find and fix the dark pattern at the scale, just like what Ariana said, that we are actually scanning the sites, the public sites, and the apps for our clients, identify the legal violations, and provide the corresponding the fair patterns. And violations is going to be from the EU as well as from the US, both the country and the region perspective, basically. So that's going to be help them in understand how exactly it is. So it takes like 3 years of R&D with the multidisciplinary team, which also includes the as I said, like a UX strategists, the neurosciences, plain language, the experts, and obviously the privacy and legal experts. And each of them are having probably like 10 to 12 basically the independent experts as well on top of those multidisciplinary teams. We are working with the law firms, the companies, and the regulators, and we obviously cannot name like our clients as of now, but they all are actually auditing the sites of the major European e-retailers as an example, or our focus mainly onto the e-retail, finance, automotive, and gaming. These are the 4 or 5 the domain that we are actually focusing for now. What we are solving, or we are solving, is like the dark patterns in a page, and not limited to the one dark pattern per page or something. It's a multiple dark patterns within actually the same design. We also actually have is the multilingual context. So it's not just the English, but in different region in EU as well as in US, also certain parts in Asia, we are actually doing the multilingual thing as well. We are creating the journey because it's going to be a payment journey. It's going to be like a buying journey. So different journeys, different things, and how exactly it is. It's going to be a domain and context specifics, which is also generating the priorities. So those kind of things, and we will actually talk more about on that as we actually go. But what we are also working on, it's a multi-page. We are also working on the video content, and not just necessarily from the the image perspective or so. We are also leveraging the multi-models, Gen AI and traditional ML to balance the process pipelines and how to do it. We also actually be very vigilant about the performance as well as the latency management opportunities as well, because we need to make sure that it's not only just the cost effective, but also the accurate and timely manner we can actually do this. So some of the things we do with the technical side, and as we go, I will actually add more, information on that. Back to you, Claudia.
Now I'll give the floor to Vincent so he can explain his work.
Thank you, Claudia. So as Claudia mentioned, I'm the head of CNIL's Digital Innovation Lab. It's a fancy name, but we are actually a very small team, yet a multidisciplinary team. We work on design, computer science, sociology, and foresight. We have 4 fancy missions, which are to explore, to experiment, to exchange, and to equip. Since I have only a few minutes, I will just focus on the last 2 missions, which are to exchange. So we're trying to build bridges with the academic world and to also kind of be an academic lab on our own, trying to write papers, to find grant as well, to build projects, research projects with different perspectives. And we're trying to also equip in the sense that we're trying to build tools for CNIL and for CNIL public. So because we're a very small team, both are actually mixed, and often we'll have to reuse tools that are available in open source to be able to fulfill this mission. So that was a quick explanation of what LINK is, the Digital Innovation Lab. I will just to rely on cookies and dark patterns, remind a quick history of CNIL position on cookie notice. So CNIL issued his cookie guidance back in 2020, and we started to do enforcement in 2021. So we automatically analyzed some websites that were setting cookies before any user action. So we analyzed only 90 websites, and after we sent order to comply, most of them complied. At the end of 2021, we issued big sanctions against websites that were not having reject button on the first layer of the cookie. I know it might sound a bit of a detail, but it was really important for us to be sure that users were in a position to reject cookie as easily as they were accepting them. And only, I think, at the end of last year, we really started to look deeper into dark patterns, in the sense that look at the impact of design and the interface of cookie banners on user consent. And so last year we issued several order to comply to website publishers that were using cookie banners that had reject button, but they were lost in the middle of the text. So it was really not possible for an average user to realize that it was possible to reject cookies. And so I must say that actually, to make a link with the previous panel, these cookie banners were based on CMP, but they were also customized. So by default, the CMP might have provided a useful content, but the way the cookie banner was customized, the CSS was customized, making it impossible for the users to identify the reject button on the consent notice. So detecting cookies before any action can be automatized. Clicking on different type of buttons to see what happens when you reject cookies could also be automatized. It's a bit complicated, but it can also be automatized. But the remaining challenges is how to detect dark patterns at a large scale, and that's where we are trying to use tools that are available as well. For this mission, to fulfill this goal, we are using two different tools. One of them is developed by Perrin, which is a French administration, and so it can be used to quickly analyze many websites with different CMPs and detect accept and reject buttons. And the other tool that we are using is based on an academic paper called Automated Large-Scale Analysis of Cookie Notice Compliance by a team at ETH Zurich, so Ahmed Bouhoula, Karol Kubicek, Amit Zak, Carlos Cotrini, and David Bazin. And so basically we use this tool because it's available, it's open source, and it's quite transparent for us. We can really make modifications in the code and see what's happening. And also two other reasons is that why we use a specific tools is that when we reached for the authors, they responded, and which was quite necessary to use the tool. And they're also very keen on making it maintained. So they maintain it over time to make sure that it can be used by different parties. And that's also very important for us to make sure that not only we can use the tool, but also the third parties that we are auditing can use the same tools to observe the same things than we do.
Thank you so much. And finally, but not least, Stefan.
Thank you. I'm Stefan Schauer. I'm coming from Neub. As you might know or not know, we filed massive complaints with cookie banners back in we had two batches. One was in 2021 and one was in August 2022. And basically, we were looking for the CMP warrant trust and checking how the CMP was configured. And basically, our findings was that in the end, we filed then 637 complaints, and still to this day, 320 are still pending. So there is still ongoing procedure. For the technical side, basically what we did is we selected web pages where we were certain that they are using OneTrust. We had an automated scan where we basically looked, checked the website, not only for if they're compliant with cookie banners and with setting cookies, but also a little bit with dark patterns. But that was not our main aim. And then in the end, with the pre-selection of the computer, we gave the whole thing to a human that needed to confirm what the computer found. Also, this is a legal obligation because we need to have a data subject in order to file a complaint with the DPA. Then in the end, we automatically created the complaint, sent this to the company, and told them you have like 30 days to comply with it. After 30 days, if you don't comply, we're gonna send it over to the DPA. Otherwise, we just rip it up, and like nothing happened. That being said, the responses from the DPA were quite mixed. So we had some funny things, like one DPA requested us to print out the recording, the HAR file, which is like the recording what you're doing on the browser, and wanted to have this as a PDF, which, as a computer scientist, I can say with confidence that there is no information then transmitted to you anymore. Then also we had one glitch where we accidentally sent over an empty complaint. So there was the whole structure was there, but it didn't say that the website violated any cookie, any of the violations that we defined. and still the DPA responded to us and said they're going to look into it. So somehow they didn't really read it or something like that. Then we also had DPAs telling us that we were out to get the website, so we targeted them, which was of course true, but like, yeah, there's no difference if you visit a website in trying to get a violation or not. So yeah, but on the positive side, we saw some spillover effects. So we saw that other websites that we didn't visit suddenly complied with the GDPR. And also what we also saw that OneTrust was sending out the guides to their customers saying, hey, you need to do this and this and this to be GDPR compliant, which of course not everybody followed through, but at least we could see some positive effects on that as well.
Great. Just before opening maybe the floor to the questions to the public, because it's CPDPai, I think the question needs to be asked, no? What is the added value of AI? Should AI be used in these tools to identify deceptive patterns? Where does the human fall in the loop? I don't know if you want to start, Ariana, maybe.
Yeah, I can say something. Maybe really from our point of view of trying to build this whole system based on GPT. And basically, as I was mentioning before, there are a few issues that we wanted to address and we needed to address, and we didn't expect that, okay? So first of all, we were expecting to be able to find data sets out there. There exist data sets. Some of them have been published with conferences of journals, and then they're not available anymore. Those that are available, you look into them, and you expect to find data sets about their patterns, but then there are a lot of varieties. This is my very personal opinion. It's not written anywhere, but I can justify that. So basically, some of them are not, so basically what I'm trying to say is that some of the researchers behind all of these tools, maybe they're not expert in their patterns. So they maybe, with a superficial understanding of what dark patterns are, understood as user interface elements, they just found some correlation between certain dark patterns categories and certain elements. I just make a very specific example. Thumbs up Facebook icons, okay? Stars icons, which are associated with ratings. Close buttons associated with advertisements. So all of those are not necessarily indicators of dark patterns. Those are only user interface elements. If you find one of those elements, it doesn't mean that necessarily you have a dark pattern. So this is why I'm trying to say that some of those data sets are actually biased, or they are not about dark patterns. They're about finding certain interface elements on interface screenshots. Okay, so the problem is that we had to do, and then some of them also use a lot of different descriptions and labels. Okay, this is also a big issue. What we use is the ontology of some of Natalia Bielova and Cristina Santos and colleagues, which is of course not perfect, honestly, but still it's one of the very first attempts to try to structure, to systematize all of this knowledge happening out there. Okay, and then another issue that we had was that, well, you know, like all of this research is about dark patterns, but dark patterns is really a researcher's terms. As you have listened from the others, actually they're all looking to legal violations, which is something different, okay? You can make a link, of course, with the terminology that we use in research, but what is actually useful is to have a tool that is able to detect legal violations, which is another step there. And then there are other issues. For example, the fact that, I'm taking it a little bit far away, but what I'm trying to say is that what we found, for example, when we were trying to build this reliable data set of dark pattern instances, which is labeled according to labels that we all agree upon, is that not even experts agreed on what was a dark pattern or not, even though we have the ontology, and that's what we used as a basis, okay? Which raises other questions. Some questions are, for example, well, are the descriptions of the ontology good enough, for example, or over-comprehensive or under-comprehensive to be able to reliably label actual data? And I'm wondering, I'm doing this question in many other research studies, and maybe we need to work on that. Or maybe there is some subjective evaluation there, so it's not a binary classification, yes, it's a dark pattern, not it's a dark pattern, there are a lot of other contextual elements to keep in consideration. So maybe the task is not a binary task. So maybe we're just doing something wrong in that regard. Or subjective can be also, oh, what is complex language? Okay, can it be, some of our interviewees, for example, that we had were saying, hey, you know, like you cannot just say that something is complex, so it's a complex language dark pattern. It really depends on the user and on the kind of expertise it has. So also that is perfectly, and it's not a really objective, it's more subjective. We also do not only need to look into screenshots, that's for sure. That's something that I think Trash can also speak about a bit more. But there are a lot of other questions, I think, before asking whether AI is really useful or not on the actual knowledge base that we're trying to create as a research community, as an interdisciplinary community, on what their patterns are or not, that we still need to answer before being able to reliably use AI tools.
Great, thank you, Ariana. Sorry, Trash, you were mentioned as like maybe you can speak a little bit more and build on what Ariana was saying.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what Ariana says is really, she actually touched the point, which is really the necessity before even we go to the AI. It's a data sets, right? And it's how reliable or verifiable or even replicable. And that's what actually it is. For some people, as she mentioned, that some people, certain things may not be actually a dark pattern. It's just the inconvenience to the user. And then they are feeling like, and this is like, pressuring them or forcing them to do certain things while it is not. But eventually, what we are doing basically is after finding the dark pattern, the legality part of it, the fines and other things that the EU or US is actually doing it, or any sort of the output that we are going to have based on, that's going to be all based on the data set that we are using it. So to ensure the reliability and maybe the replicability as well, the data set must be diverse. It should be actually well documented, and also it should be representative of a real world problems across the culture, devices, industries, and different basically the coefficients we need to actually consider it. At what we do is basically at the Fair Pattern is like, and we advocate for the transparent data set labeling that captures both the UI context as well as the behavioral implications. And replication is only possible when the tools are developed with the open, methodologies and ideally like, some sort of the auditable models. So the data set we use is the academic data sets from the Princeton, the Professor Mather et al., and our own curated data set based on our expertise and the practices. And our curated data set was actually analyzed by the multidisciplinary team, as I mentioned before as well, with the neurosciences, privacy experts on both, on all the three, Asia, EU, as well as the US, the UX strategists, the consumer protection experts, the plain language, thing, and our co-founder part of the expert support group on the dark patterns onto the board as well. So what we do basically is verifying the data set by actually having is the academic state of the art, the case law that actually we monitor very closely around the world in our R&D lab, every week basically. There is we have a Harry Brignall, which is our senior advisor, and work on our data sets. And that's where actually we are doing the output, which is going to be the taxonomy agnostic, right? Where we are using the Harris taxonomy by default, but the tool that can provide the results are like any of the 16 plus existing taxonomies and the Gray's, ontology that we have actually discussed about that we are doing it basically. So the approach we adopt is, I say, to ensure that the model learns from the feedback and learning over the period, not like in just one or two runs or executions or so, or one or two clients or one or two sites or so. So we attempt to ensure that the principle and instructions, the level issues that needs to be appropriately considered. So the mechanism that we have applied is primarily to orchestrate the feedback in a manner that the model learn from the diverse examples and instances over the period. Because every human has a different perspective of the same thing that they see online or offline or so. So we need to make sure that we are having a different perspective and as unbiased as we can. So that's what we are doing it when it comes to the data sets before even going to the AI side of it. But definitely AI is actually going to help in expedite some of the things that we are going to do, and we are far there is a future that we haven't seen it yet, which is coming in 3 to 6 months, and you will see that how much we can get into this. But yeah.
Vincent and Stefan, if you want to chip in.
Sure. So on where AI can be useful, I think, one obvious is scalability. So to detect cookies that are set before any action, we don't need AI, but to detect accept and reject button, we have to use machine learning if you want to be able to do that on many websites. So that's something where it's very useful. I think right now also to detect dark patterns, we have to rely on some heuristics and to use contrast ratio. I think that can be gamed a bit and like users, publishers that want to comply with contrast ratio, but can still hide the reject button in some way. Maybe AI, I don't know, that's a big question, but maybe it can be helpful in having something which is not based on fixed parameters, but to detect the visibility of reject button or the lack of visibility, most likely. But there are also many challenges. First, for example, to train a model, we'll need data, and we can't use data that are extracted from orders to comply that we send. So, for example, if we send order to comply, or if we find a website, we cannot then, in many instances, we do not say which websites were fine. So it's hard to also for computer scientists to train models based on proven infringements, because in many cases this is not public. I think we'll also be waiting for legal challenges. I think if we use AI very completely in a full, only AI in a case, and where there is no human in the loop, that will be challenged for sure. But even if just the case is triggered by AI, I guess we'll also have legal challenges. So probably we'll wait to have one legal challenges appeal and maybe one decision at the ECG level. That will be very helpful to be able to know if we can use this tool to trigger an investigation. If we use AI, and because we have to publish the tools that we're using, and they have to be open source, I think it can be circumvented as well. So if they know which tool we're using, they can try to game as well. So that means that you still have to have a human in the loop to be able to say, well, this is a dark patterns, and even though the AI didn't detect it.
Yeah, for us, for the last two complaints, the batches of complaints that we launched, there was no AI model available online, open source, so we just did it manually. But for the future, it may be something that we are considering, but the very good thing that we saw by not using AI was that we relied on a config file that was embedded in the website, and which was more proof than any screenshot could have been, because it's like, for example, for the reject button or for the naming of the reject button, that's everything is stored in this config file, and therefore we can really hard proof that this was the text that's shown here. And if somebody says no, that's not the case, then we have the data here, which is the same. And also, as the CMPs are quite big companies and are rather are still cannot change so easily their configuration. Normally, the configuration stays the same for quite a long time, and therefore AI is not a topic right now for us.
Great. So we have around like 35 minutes for questions for the public, but from what I gather, basically the data sets are not good, and the quality will definitely of these data sets then affect an AI model. If you do it from a regulatory perspective, then you cannot really take those infringement to train models, and then sometimes it's just not useful, and there are better ways to kind of find those infringements that make a stronger case. Is there any questions? Let me just here, and there. Let's start with Sir.
Thank you very much. Very, very intriguing discussion. But I need to start with an apology. I'm one of the lawyers in the room. Okay? My name is Eric Valgaeren. I'm a partner at a law firm, Stibbe here in Brussels, leading the digital and data practice. We live on a different planet. So please indulge my question. You're talking a lot in terms of data science, data analytics, the modeling, et cetera, please help me. What is it in terms of data points that you are looking for to establish a correlation with dark patterns? I mean, I bring these cases, but I want to just have some clarification, some light at the end of this tunnel to understand what type of data are you looking for in your models, what type of indications do you identify or find interesting to identify dark panels? That's the first question. Second one, in the title, you talk about detecting illegal deception online. Now, online, I think we can agree what it is, but then the question is, how do you deal from a computer science perspective with these qualifications? Something is deceptive, yes, no? I mean, do you ask somebody in the US? Do you ask somebody in France, in Germany, in Scandinavia? And how do you qualify it as illegal? But that's more in my line of work, but I'm intrigued by that as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I think the first question on the data points, maybe Trash, you want to answer it? Were you able to hear it, Trash, the first question? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the questions. I think it's a very heavy and loaded question as far as the data itself goes. But you are right, as I have touched base on the cultural side of it. You are absolutely right that everybody does not have a clear understanding of what exactly is the dark pattern is, on how exactly it can be detected also. So the data that I am and we are looking for so first of all, the human intervention is required. So human has to actually come into the picture once actually when we collect the data, and then we are going to actually use the data in unbiased manner as far as possible, and then we can actually provide that as a feedback mechanism. So the data that we are looking for as of now is, there are two ways to do it. Either we can actually have a synthetic data, and then we are actually running our own tool with the publicly available sites, and then we collect those data, do the feedback, compare with like the list of the taxonomy that we are having it. The second step is going to be the legality part of it, fines and all the other things, but that's also has been clearly defined by the FTC that what are the dark patterns in certain extent or so. And then with the use of the experts like you as a lawyer, we are going to make sure about it that whatever the FTC rules are there and whatever we actually have identified, are they aligned with that or not? And once we actually have that, the feedback from the human, then we are providing that feedback data back to the model to identify and make it more and more actually privacy by design approach kind of thing. Does that make sense to you? Does that give you the answer about what type of data that we are looking for?
You explained perfectly well, I think, the process, but I'm still stuck with the question, what are you looking for? What is the data you're looking for? Not the way you handle them. What is it you're focusing on? And again, I apologize.
No, you're good. I mean, it's again, so when you are actually looking at an image, so as far as our thing and fair pattern goes, we have one image which we actually put it up into our tool. So what we are looking for is an HTML and CSS from the technical perspective. HTML and CSS structure of the web pages, that how exactly is being classified or how it's been done. We are also actually looking for the DOM free data structure, which is nothing but like the kind of an document object, the model that every web applications are actually using it. So we are looking for those kind of a thing underneath, each of them or so. Then what we are actually looking for is also the clickable elements and call to action labels. So some of them are things like the button, but they are not, and some of them are really button, but it's a link. So what are the clickable elements once we actually go through these things? Also from the user behavioral data, we are actually seeing the mouse, the movements. That's the next part. But mouse movement and scroll patterns and where exactly they click when they're actually going through this journey or so. On the other hand, the textual data, which is nothing but, as I say, like the button labels or the pop-up text or the consent, the banners, terms and conditions, those kind of thing, we are looking when we are looking at one of the things. Also, what we are doing is from the UX perspective, we are actually looking and the label examples that how exactly this bait and switch, or it's confirm shaming, or it's in data, it's not going to be the Roche model. How exactly that is being done from the US perspective? So once we gather the data, we are dividing them into the different buckets and categories, and different type of multidisciplinary team are looking at differently. Same thing for accept all and decline kind of a thing, and whether it's a small, whether it's a gray, whether it's in blue, whether it's like, the font size, font family, those kind of a thing when we are actually getting the data from the image. Does that make a little bit more sense than the previous answer?
And Ariana, maybe, or anybody here wants to take the second question of like what is illegal, deception, and etc. How do you actually make sense out of that?
Yeah, so maybe from our point of view, from a researcher's point of view, as I was mentioning before, we try to actually rely on what is accepted knowledge in the research community, mainly. This is why we were relying on ontologies. I agree with you that it's very hard to define what is deceptive and not. Actually, the word deception may also be misleading. I think manipulative may be more comprehensive, let's say. But this is why I mentioned earlier that we also still need to systematize a lot of knowledge. For example, even just by speaking with the interviewees, as mentioned earlier, we got to know that what they consider, so some of, for example, the consumer protection authorities, when we asked them as one of the first interview questions, like, okay, just to be sure that we're on the same page, what is a legal violation on a user interface for you? We also got some answers of, so what is a deceptive design pattern for them that is not included in the ontology, for example, okay? Or maybe, so some examples of dark patterns that we, in the research community, maybe we still, actually the ontology is not only about the research studies, but maybe we still haven't really agreed upon, okay? So what I'm trying to say is it's very flexible there. So I don't know yet. I think that maybe you could be more, let's say, able to answer to this question. But according to me, it's also fair that we still haven't got to a full consensus and agreement. I really am fond of having these kind of discussions and trying to still understand what is the baseline, so what is the, or let's say the knowledge that we're trying to, that are trying to agree to, and also that we have different views on this. So we still haven't got there, but I'm happy that we're having these kind of conversations. And I know that you would like more to have a black or white answer, I think, on what is deceptive or not, what could be considered this or not. But I think it really, so there are so many different actors involved. There are so many different also jurisdictions involved. We are also looking to this problem from, what I was trying to say before is that we're looking at this problem from different perspectives, and this is why sometimes it's so hard to align, that for now, I'm happy with having this kind of misalignment, but I agree that there are a lot of efforts, as I was mentioning before, to try to get to an alignment, to speak about the same things with a vocabulary that we can rely on, and that identifies the same thing. But from my point of view, from what I saw in these studies, we're still not there. But it's okay, we're still discussing. But maybe you have a more practical answer to this.
Maybe on the illegal or legal parts, I think, so there were, I think, cases handled by EDPB where they highlight what are the characteristic of reject button that is not considered compliant. So for example, when it's barely visible and outside the consent banner, so that's clearly an example of what is considered being illegal. And also I think at a different state level, we have also cases that are being brought by local DPAs. So I know I think in Austria and Belgium, they have also a very clear case on what is required for reject buttons to be legal or not. In France, we are also, as I mentioned, we had a first set of orders to comply that were issued back in December, and where we try to explain, so at least we try to explain what is not legal, what clearly is deceptive, because the reject button is not visible for the average users. And it can be based on different studies showing that consent rate will vary quite significantly if the reject button is not visible for the user.
Great. If it's okay for the next questions, let's take 2 questions at a time for the sake of time's sakes. So here, and that's Midas, right? Midas. Let's go that way. First, sorry, yeah.
Thank you very much. I have three fast questions, which is connected, and one story based on these questions. First of all, we are talking about the dark patterns. Do you think that the cookies are the most threatened dark patterns? And what is the correlation then between the cookies and the dark patterns? And do you think that the approach which we have now in Europe with the banners, with agree, disagree, partially agree, would be the best approach how to protect people's rights? And what harm as well can be done by cookies for the people, and what real rights and what real real rights of people we protect with this banner and with these cookies. And one story why I'm asking is, I'm teaching law in the university, data protection law, and before the lecture on cookies, I always ask students, how many of you can detect that there is agree and disagree buttons, and 50% raises their hands. So out of the 70 people, which is an audition, then I ask, like, who of you puts the agree button, and there's 80% who raises their hands. Then I'm asking them, and how many of you would be agreed to get rid of this banner and do not see it anymore? And there is as well the same 80% who raises the hands. And when I'm asking why it is and why you agree, they're saying they like advertising, which is personalized. They like the songs that they like or videos that they like, and they think that this is more personal approach. It's more affordable for them. So that's why I am asking these three questions to you, because real life and what we are talking about now, it's a little bit different. Thank you.
Great. Let's just pass the microphone back. It will be easier. Thank you.
Hi, Midas Nouwens from the Dutch Data Protection Authority and also researcher on dark patterns, cookie banners, and all this other kind of stuff. I'm asking you a question that I ask myself, and actually perhaps I should have gone first because you almost asked the exact same thing. What is the end goal of having perfect detection of dark patterns and having these nice data sets? Is it to have perfectly compliant interfaces? And if that is the problem that you're trying to solve, is there perhaps something else that we should do instead? And I'm saying this again as somebody who's also done this, shameless plug. We also have a tool that we use that we developed. It's open source. We published it last month, consent-observatory.eu. But right, have we just been suckered into the conversation and the narrative of we need to have perfect cookie banners? And is this actually, are we actually solving the real harm that is being done to people's privacy and data protection?
Great, thank you. I don't know who wants to take it. Let's start with Stefan.
Yeah, sorry. I don't think that it's that this should be the end game that we're trying to get every cookie banner, because basically, if we are able to have totally aligned cookie banners, and if every website complies with the GDPR, still the people need to click somewhere, and it's totally, nobody wants to do that. So basically, what we would like to see is something like the do not track functionality, that this is somehow rolled out. But of course, there's not a move coming from the industry. There is not really something seen on the political side that they want to go for that. But that would, in my personal view, the best thing to see. For if cookie banners are really posing a threat, it's not about if it's a threat or not a threat. According to the GDPR, you are allowed not to be tracked, not to have cookies on your computers, and therefore, maybe if people like it, they can click allow. But I don't see that this is a question of is it dangerous or not. It's my right as computer user, as a user on websites, not to have cookies on my computer from particular websites. Yeah, I think that's it.
Happy to take the question. Well, I think, is it the perfect solution? Clearly not. I was pushing for do not track before joining CNIL. I was pushing for do not track while I was at CNIL, but that didn't take off. And so we're having this solution right now. I think it's true that probably most students accept cookies and many don't pay attention to the cookie banner. But I believe that when they want to pay attention or when they go on websites for which They know it may be sensitive. Not only probably they will reject cookies, but also most likely to use private browsing or this kind of thing, or delete cookies when that is necessary. And so I think we've moved from a position where it was not natural to have its browsing history tracked by third parties, where it is okay most of the time, but when you don't want that to happen, you actually can use the tools that you know exist. And mostly also because there was such focus on cookies, these tools were developed in the first place. I think, I'm not sure they will have private browsing mode if browsing history wasn't such a big issue. That being said, I also think it created another issue, is that the same cookie banners that are now used for just cookies, and it's just cookies, are now also used on many mobile applications to track location. And if you look into the fine print of the cookie banners, you'll see that when you're on mobiles, your location will also be tracked. It will be collected by third parties that will, and we have also other studies where this location data are then shared with many third parties and data brokers that just put them on marketplace. And you can get free samples, without having to prove anything. And that's really an issue, that the same cookie banner are now used, and the same consent banner are used to set cookies on your on your browsers and to collect your location. And I think users don't realize that. I think there is no such thing as private browsing mode with respect to location. So it's important that, and from a legal point of view, when people accepted to have their location tracked with and shared with third parties, we're also a bit stuck because they provided the consent. So I think the issue with cookie banner is just, cookie is not the right term anymore. We should really focus on tracking and all the type of data that can be collected by third party and sold by data broker on marketplaces.
And if I may overstep as a moderator, as somebody coming from the global south that didn't have any data protection regulation, I'm always surprised how the cookie banners change. When I go visiting back my family, websites that here in Europe you would have any preference, back there have insane amounts of cookies. And I'm always grateful when I come back. It's like, at least I have that preference. And I think sometimes I don't appreciate that. That would be my own opinion. And on the Do Not Track initiative, there's a good XKCD comment on yet another, protocol, yet another standard. So let's put yet another standard just to lighten up a bit the mood. If you don't know XKCD, the comic, go and check it out. It's really good. Any other questions? Let's go there and there.
Hi, I'm Sanju Ahuja. I'm from INRIA. Just to add on to the discussion of agreement and disagreement between experts, do you think it might be useful to separate the concepts of what is the nature of the dark pattern and what is the degree, or the extent or the threshold to which how problematic it is? For example, Iriana, you were talking about complex language, and it may be that experts do agree on that there is complex language, but disagree to the extent or the threshold to which there is complex language, and hence whether it is problematic or not, and hence whether it rises to the level of a dark pattern or not. Thank you.
Great. And then there was the other hand was there.
Hi, thank you. What I'm seeing and what I'm also hearing today is that the focus is still very much on websites, while the compliance rates in apps seems to be much lower. Are these more difficult to analyze, and will we at some point see a shift from public interest organizations and supervisory authorities towards apps?
Perfect. I don't know if anyone wants to start. Ariana.
Can I get the first question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So thank you so much for that suggestion. Indeed, I think it is the way to go. So basically, I don't think it's really a binary classification task in many of these cases. That's what we saw, basically, for many reasons I mentioned before, also some that I didn't mention. I think a degree isn't that bad, also because that gives the nuances, right? And also so why that is not a yes or no answer, but it's more of a degree and the threshold, maybe. And going exactly back to the point that you were making, also connecting to a question that was asked before, for example, about the simplification of language or the complexity of language, right? So as I mentioned before, okay, it really depends, it's dependent on user, etc. However, there are objective measurements of the complexity of language. So there are scales that you can use to understand that are established, they are different from language to language. We can also discuss whether one scale is better than another. However, there are those kind of metrics that have been accepted by the community that you can use to gauge, so to evaluate whether, for example, a certain text is over a certain education level, for example. No? And this is also interesting in terms of solutions that you could develop, right? Because you do not only, so I don't think that we should stop at analyzing what is bad. I think it wouldn't be bad to also start using these tools to propose maybe certain solutions. To stick with this point, for example, it is already possible to simplify language automatically. Okay, of course, we can say, okay, for English languages, there are many more resources than other, let's say, under-resourced computationally under-resourced languages. However, we could, for example, already work towards simplifying automatically some of what has been evaluated as a very complex and legalistic language. Then we need to use a lot of caveats there because, of course, it depends on whether you want to oversimplify, etc., etc. But I think it is possible to have these kind of degrees. So absolutely. I will stop there, but yeah, maybe my point was really we need also, what we're trying to do also, to go back to one of the questions earlier, is that we're trying to establish measurable features so that we have and also to look at what metrics already are out there. Maybe they have been used in other kind of domains and we can borrow from those domains. And in terms of deception, there has been a lot done, for example, in cybersecurity. There's been a lot done also in misinformation. So we can really borrow a lot from other domains that are working on similar problems. Of course, it's still a work in progress, but I do think it is possible to do that.
Great. And the second question would be privacy is more on websites, not just apps. I don't know if, Stefan, you want them maybe trash after?
Yeah, it's like to see what's on a website is super easy. To see what's happening on the app is like so. It's really complicated. So normally the only thing that you can do is you can track the network traffic that's coming from the mobile. But then the problem is you don't know, is it coming from the app? Is it coming from the operating system? And also to be able to decrypt what is sent over is also, it's possible, but like hard, really hard. There are tools for that. We ran some really superficial tests. The results are really catastrophic. So basically, before you are able to even click on some app, already your Google Ad ID is transmitted to wherever. But yes, websites are the prime target right now because it's easier to analyze them, and there is more knowledge on that. But yeah, it's absolutely necessary to look much more into mobile apps because they are like this is the Wild West of data protection.
I don't know, Trash, if you've seen your tool being used by any app owner or similar.
Yeah, and I agree with my fellow panelists as well that it's very difficult to actually do with the GPS or with like any sort of the things onto the mobile app. We have and mostly people don't realize the concept of the VPN as well. So if you are using the VPN and if you are actually using any websites or any app or anything else, you can definitely manipulate where exactly the data that you would like to actually share or publicly available. So there is that as well. So I completely agree with the Stefan, and he already put like 7 times very, very, very difficult. I put 3, 5 more. It's really difficult to actually do it onto the mobile app. But that's the thing that we should actually start looking into this as well, because that's the easiest way for the people to buy and having especially in the e-commerce sites and e-commerce app, it's easier for them to actually use that compared to going to the website or so. So we have to do it. But the food for the thought as well, which is, again, we are very, very ahead of the curve. Think about 2027 or 28, basically 2 to 3 years down the line. Right now we have the website, right now we have the app. I can bet, and it's already been started, working through the voice as well. So you can actually order something from the Google, Home or the Echo devices by just doing the voice thing. So at that time also, we need to actually come back, and again, maybe the CPDP 2027, we will actually talk about this. But there will be something that is also ahead of the curve that we need to think about it and food for the thought, that how exactly needs to be done. But otherwise, all of our clients or the beta testers which they are using it as of now, they are it's getting tricky basically to just massage the data and getting ready for the models as well. But we are not there yet. We are still actually working on that front.
Reminds me of something that was said on the last panel, as like how the web is also becoming less transparent. Also, if this is the case with apps, this is now becoming an urgent matter once again. Are there any more? Yes, there. And is there any other more questions? Somebody? Okay, there and there. Because we've been very efficient, so that's cool.
Hi, I'm Natalia Bilova from INRIA. So I want to follow up on Mida's question about building the perfect tool. So let's imagine that we as computer scientists tomorrow are building this fantastic tool to detect dark patterns. And it works well, let's assume. Okay, so in that case, so first, what we will do is that we'll take the current definitions of dark patterns that maybe, first question, maybe not matching perfectly what is considered illegal. So that's the first question. So how can we, do we need to build something now, or should we wait for new decisions that will come out? Again, my question is outside of the scope of cookie banners, because there a lot has been done. Everything that's not cookie banners, there is not much, right? So that's the first question. And the second question is, would regulators be interested even in using this kind of large-scale detection tools? Is it even relevant to do that? Because right now, regulators have cases on very specific companies that they are studying one by one, like it was with cookie banners in the past. So is it the right approach to build now this type of tools? Thank you.
And we can take the other question. So if I might chip in while we pass the microphone. There's a very good paper of Professor Gisardi about that, how to maintain tools, software, and ontologies, how to embed ontologies into AI models and kind of keep it maintained. It's just reminded me a little bit.
Thank you very much. My name is Finn Myrstad from the Norwegian Consumer Council. Thank you for an excellent panel. And just a reflection question. Even with the perfect, the tools you're creating is fantastic, and more of that, please. So the question is more like philosophical, but political. Isn't it fundamentally still wrong to put a burden on the consumer for even with a perfect consent banner? Because can it ever really be informed and free? And if you share with 800 third parties, do you really know what you're accepting to? So shouldn't we really try to go to the core of the business model? And maybe shouldn't some of these practices be banned in the first place? And then, of course, your detection tools should be used to check enforcement of those bans. Because I think your point with mobile phones is excellent, right? We try to do the same ourselves, and it's Wild West. So I think we need to go deeper on that question. But of course, I applaud these efforts to find ways of automating dark patterns, because we really need that as well. But there are so many other dark patterns to deal with that we should really get rid of some of these worst problems, because and not try to find a perfect solution to do something with them from a sort of technical point of view, maybe. So just want your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Great. Who wants to start first? You want to take the first one? Does somebody want to take the first question?
So, is it the right time to build a tool to automatically detect dark pattern? I think the dark patterns will evolve as well. And so even it's probably the right time to detect many dark patterns, even outside cookie banners. We'll probably see other type of dark patterns emerging. And so it's probably the right time to build this tool, and then there will be a next one. But and so with respect to the number of cases that authorities are handling, I think if we have objective criteria that we can use also to say this is obviously illegal based on this and this criteria, that's very helpful for the case as well. So I wouldn't underestimate the usefulness of this type of tool if we can explain in what this is illegal and what type of illegal practices are in place in this type of dark pattern. And so I forgot what the second question.
If you should put the burden on the consumer.
Yeah, so, well, that's not to the DPA to say, right? But up to a year ago, we were still hoping that maybe the industry will move away from third-party cookies. And so maybe also this slowed down some of the investments. And so I wouldn't have believed that we will have this conversation still today, a year ago. And so the industry didn't, not all the industry got in that direction. Maybe we can hope that browsers will eventually got there, but not as quickly as we could have hoped, and not as certainly not as quickly as we expected a year ago.
Can I add something to answer to Natalia? So it's a provocative question. It's a very broad question, and I'm not, of course, part of an authority. So I can just tell you a little bit of what we found out in this research. Okay, so I think that maybe a general purpose tool is not going to be that useful from what I understood. So from what our interview said, I mean, they work on very specific use cases. Maybe they develop one tool for a very specific dark pattern. It can be a countdown timer. Why? Because it has very, very specific, let's say, characteristics. And also it evolves over time. So it's better to update that kind of tool according to the evolution, instead of having one tool that is able to detect any kind of dark pattern. So this is just one finding also maybe for the computer scientists that are here, or the researchers that would like also to help that kind of work. So it's a kind of dynamic knowledge, as you mentioned, also depending on the legal cases that are discussed, or and on the legal proceedings, which also brings us to another question. So another theme that is emerging is that they're also very national dependent, of course. So we have, of course, right? So we have certain authorities that say we only work with our the legal cases of our own. No, so our own knowledge base, okay, and that's how we detect, how we develop tools to detect other violations. We look at what we already sanctioned. And then also I always refer to one of the research studies that you published, Natalia, I'm a big fan, which is two words apart, right, where you actually also show that on a very specific topic, which is cookie consent banners, then 17 guidelines on certain topics, they say different things. Of course, there are reasons for that, but also they also say different things regarding compared to what research says, right? So what would make sense from a more behavioral economics point of view, right? So knowledge is very complex. Maybe one way, it's something that also I wanted to mention. We're done. Yes. Okay. Is that well? There is, from everybody that we actually interviewed, all of them were really keen on collaborating with academia. They really look up at what we are doing. They read our papers. They create collaboration opportunities. For example, the CNILS Researchers Day. They really want to listen to what we do. Of course, they cannot just read all of the papers that we publish. We need to really reach out to them. You know that very well, right? But so there is this channel that is possible to introduce. And also one of the things that really came out a lot, and also I want to stress this, is that they need open source tools for a lot of these different reasons. One of them is that you can then adapt them to your own use case as a data protection authority, for example, but for a very simple reason: they are free. A lot of these authorities, they are public bodies. It means that they have to go through a lot of difficult procedures, okay, if they want to acquire, if they want to purchase a certain tool. I know it, I'm a part of the public administration, it's a mess. So this is one of the reasons why they go for open source tools. Of course, they need to be very well documented. So also this is a takeaway that we want to stress. And you know, also by doing that, then you can also adapt to different use cases, to the dynamic ways of the digital services that they are evolving. So that's a very partial answer to your very big question.
So I have 90 seconds in my clock. Does somebody have a very quick, sharp question?
Can I still?
Yes.
Like, we reached out to a lot of regulators, and we don't find too many DPAs being interested in our tools. It's also still a little bit complicated because we are an NGO, and we are some kind of like, they don't want to take something from us because we have a reputation. That's the word. That's the word. And for researching for the perfect tool, we did a DPO survey, and one of the findings, I mean, it's not really, it's not it's just like maybe accidental. Some DPOs answered us, and one finding of that was that enforcement is the way to go to have companies aligned with the GDPR. You get the DPO surveys also on our booth downstairs in the first floor. And therefore, a perfect tool is important because it seems like you need the companies to give them the incentive to be compliant with the GDPR. And yeah, the cookie banners are not the end game for that, but basically it's like one first thing where the companies see that it's important to comply with the GDPR, and that's like a starting point.
Oh, thank you so much for attending. If you have any questions or want to follow up, you know where we are. Trash, thank you so much for joining. We know it's very early for you, so thank you for taking the time. And yeah, so this was the last session of the computer science track today, wasn't it? Great, yeah. So join us tomorrow. Yeah, thank you.